It's been about 3 weeks since the Super Bowl, and I am still deep in my Bad Bunny era. I am a completely new fan here thanks to the Super Bowl halftime show. So I've had a lot of catching up to do. Those billions of plays on Spotify, I am probably good for about a third of them at this point. So much Bad Bunny means, of course, so much Spanish. Now, I took Spanish in college, and I even produced Spanish language videos at one point. But this Puerto Rican dialect is completely different from anything I've ever learned. And trying to understand it has reminded me of one of the most important lessons I learned about parenting. Yes, of course, I have found a parenting connection. I'm Amy McCampbell, and this is your Tiny Parenting Minute. So here's the thing I discovered when I started listening to Bad Bunny about 3 weeks ago. He speaks and sings Spanish so fast that I can't begin to figure out what he's saying. It is just a sea of sounds to me. Fun and danceable, yes, but trying to find words or any meaning, forget it. And it hit me. This was exactly like a couple of the experiments I filmed back when I was working on this big parenting project a few years ago on how kids learn. And there were two studies that totally changed the way I parented. So the first one was by Jenny Safran. And what she looked at was how infants use baby talk. You know, when we talked in a really exaggerated way to a baby, well, it turns out that babies use that face-to-face engagement to figure out how language and speech works. All that weird stuff we do with our face and our voice that gets them to pay attention to what we're saying and helps them find speech patterns in language. Ultimately, this is how they figure out where words begin and end, which is the first step to understanding a language. These babies, they're kind of like me trying to figure out how Bad Bunny Spanish works. Now, I'm an adult, so I can pick up a translator or something to figure out what he's saying. But babies, they only have you. So here's one takeaway. Your baby needs that baby talk, and they really need that face-to-face engagement. Once I knew how much power something as simple as a conversation with a baby in baby talk was, I made sure that I gave my child that kind of interaction when we were together. So make sure your phone or whatever other distractions you have aren't getting in the way of this kind of connection with your infant. Now, the second study was with older kids, and I really feel this one. So when I'm listening to a Bad Bunny song, every now and again, I'll hear a word that I recognize, say noche. And my brain pauses to translate and say, hey, look at you. You know that word. Now, while I'm doing that, Benito has moved on to like 5 new sentences, and I'm still back here. This probably feels familiar when you hear a foreign language that you kind of know, but you aren't fluent in. It's also what kids do when they're learning language. So Professor Anne Fernald created a study that we also filmed that measures the impact of this kind of processing lag time. And what she found was that kids who were raised in a rich language environment, where caregivers surrounded them with words, but also questions and lots of thoughtful context, were able to process words so much faster. So they could hear the sound no and figure out that the word that was likely to come next was noche. And they were already thinking ahead, adding new words, building new meaning. But the kids without this exposure were like me and Bad Bunny Spanish, where we need to hear the whole word, noche, to understand it, or that we take a pause to translate the word and then we miss what comes next. Well, all those tiny pauses, they add up and they end up leaving us falling behind. Here's why these studies matter as a parent. They show just how critical human interaction is to learning about the world. When you're talking to your kids, asking them questions, reading together and discussing, you're giving them that rich language environment they need. That helps build fluency, not just vocabulary. A screen, on the other hand, will give them input. Your interactions give them context. Now, we're talking about learning language here, but this is why this is important. This is why these studies changed the way I thought about parenting. See, learning language is a metaphor for how kids pretty much learn everything. Think about it. You can drill flashcards all day, you can buy every learning app, and they might know a lot of words from that. But can they think in a language? Can they have a conversation with another person? They can't do that fluently without a lot of human-to-human interaction. The same principle extends to how they learn empathy, how they figure out social clues, how they make sense of a complicated world. It all happens through human-to-human connection, not just data input. So this week, have conversations with and around your kids. It seems obvious, but with all the screen time, not just theirs, but yours too, we're talking with each other less and less. We're losing these opportunities for rich language exchange. And don't just talk at them or answer their questions. Have a real back and forth. Ask them what they think. Let them practice using language, not just absorbing it. And if you have an infant, make sure you're having those important face to face baby talk moments. Because fluency isn't about how many words they know, it's about how fast they can think in language. And real understanding doesn't come from memorizing, it comes from engaged interaction. So every time you hear Bad Bunny this week, and he is everywhere, let it remind you of this. Connection is how we make sense of what we're hearing. Connection is how we learn. That's my lesson, and that's what I'm going to be thinking about while I'm dancing in my kitchen, trying to understand what he's saying.